I'm going to interview Natalie F. Scherf, S-C-H-E-R-F, of the village of Withee. This is December 20th, 1979, and we're in her home in the village. Ms. Scherf has been employed in the State Bank of Withee since 1917 and has risen from a teller to president of the bank. First, would you tell us a little about your past?
Well, I was born in Kenosha County and moved to Clark County with my parents in 1902. I attended the grade school in the country known as the, well, Munson School is what we always called it. It was a little difficult for me to attend school when I was small because we were quite a distance. Being 3 miles, Frenchtown is where we first went to school. That is Emmeline and the two boys. And later on, we had a new building within 1.5 miles from our home. I attended school there for 1 year, and it was decided by the district to move the school to a distance of about 3 miles from our home. And again, it was about impossible for me to attend school, but I used to go occasionally and finally got through the first 2 or 3 grades. And we were at least 3 miles from school. We used to have to go through the woods, through the water, and in the spring of the year, and all that sort of thing. Finally, a road was built which made it only a distance of 2.5 miles. And through the 8th grade, from the freshman in high school, I did go back to Kenosha County and stayed with my grandparents. But I decided that next year I wasn't going back there. I was too lonely. So I attended the Withee High School for the following 3 years. After graduation, I attended Wausau Business College. That was in 1917. In the fall of 1917, I was able to obtain a position with the State Bank of Withee, which I've been with ever since.
How has the town, the bank actually changed since you were first employed?
Well, there have been many changes in the village of Withee since I started working in the bank. At one time, the village of Withee had 3 hotels, 7 saloons. There were 3 stores, general stores, and later we had up to 4 or 5. There was a farmer store and all that, and that was a big store at that time. You better put some of this on. Let's see, what did we have? We had a shoe store. Johnny Zizoba operated a shoe store. Mr. Christensen had a feed store. And George Nielsen, a feed mill. We had a couple of livery stables. Mr. Martin had a blacksmith shop as well as Charlie Larson. At that time it was necessary to have blacksmith shops. What else do you have?
How has the population changed?
Considerable. In 1950, the population was around 300, and it remained at that figure for many years, but the recent population is 515. And I think it's increasing. We've had many new homes since that time, and I feel that the population should be at least 650 or 550. Better change that one.
In this time, has there been some new businesses that have come into town?
Well, we have the Northern Freeport Saddle Company that was established quite a few years ago, and it still operates to a certain extent. Then we also have the Hattlesteads that have, not Hattlesteads, what is it? They used to work for Freeport Salad, shut that thing. Oh, the hotels, there was, where the present bank building is, that was the Sturgeon Hotel. And then down the street further where Mrs. Durbin lived was the Moody Hotel. And that was the hotel of the day. And then across the railroad track over where, just west of Zozoba's home was the Duffner Hotel. That's where the teachers all used to have to stay. You want to know about the Sturgeon Hotel?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
The old Sturgeon Hotel, the bank bought that property in 1920. And in 1924 is when we built the new bank building. That was all, the building was all raised and everything. It took a couple of years to get in order.
How about where was the bank actually to begin with, and how did it?
That maybe I should go back here. In checking the records, the original bank building was the present library building. And that building was built in about 1903 or 4, somewhere in there. And if you'd like to know who the officers were at the 1902 when the bank was organized, Mr. A.R. Owen was the president, Edward A. Owen, vice president, W.C. Tufts was the cashier. And going back to that lot that the bank purchased from the Sturgeon Hotel, the lot cost $2,800 at that time, and at that time was considered a big price. But the bank wanted that location, so that's what they paid for it. In 1924, they built the new bank building, and we occupied it the last part of December of that year with no frolly-roll. Just went over there and started business. Well, the growth of the bank has been tremendous in the last years. In 1912, we have a record showing that the deposits were 119,000. The loans were 96,000. The capital, 20,000. In 1922, the deposits were 230,000. The loans, 233. The capital, 30,000. 1932, that was when the Depression struck. Our deposits dropped to 203,000. The loans to 204. But in 1942, were increased again by 100,000. And the loans were only 188,000. By 1952, we had deposits of over $1 million, and the loans were 471. By 1962, our deposits were over $2 million, and our loans were 916,000. At the present time, 1979, our deposits are close to 11 million. Our loans are over 7 million. Our capital is 131,250 compared to 30,000 way back in 22. Our surplus is 503,750 compared to 7,000 in 1922. So that really shows the growth of the bank.
Being a small community,
Yes.
the bank has played a really big role in I would say, keeping the community quite stable.
I feel that way.
Now, you started in 1917 at the bank. When did you move up in, when did you become president?
1960.
1960.
You mentioned that I was a teller when I started working in the bank. I was a bookkeeper. Didn't want to do teller work because I didn't feel that was my duty. I didn't feel I was supposed to do that. I told you that the other day. Why, it was funny I didn't get kicked out right away because I was afraid to go to the window and work. Didn't think that was my job.
In the sense that you've done every job.
Well, I've done about everything there is to do in the bank.
What kind of equipment? How does the equipment change from?
Oh, that's been drastic. When I first started in the work, we had to do a lot of writing. Now, we used to have to list all of our checks, handwriting, and all of our deposits. They were put in the journal. And then we transferred the total into the ledger, all by hand. We had an ad machine and we used to have to pull a handle. It wasn't electrified. Then, I would say after I'd been there maybe 4 years or so, we got another machine that we could add up our checks on, but it was still hand operated. And then we would add to prove our work, we had to add the checks and the previous balance and deduct the present balance, and that had to correspond with what our checks and deposits were during the day. And if you made a mistake, you had to go over that all over again. Then a few years later, we got the two. We had to work that twice. We had to give our customer a statement and our own ledger. That was something else. I think it used to take me 2 or 3 hours to do that if we had a busy day. And then we had another thing that we had to do that was so time consuming, was all of our outside checks. We called them foreign items, checks on other banks. We had to list those individually, handwriting, on remittance sheets, we called them. And that used to take terrible, it was awful. The time consuming with all that. Now you just run them through the machine and that's it. Then, let's see, after a while we had a machine that was electrified, which did help somewhat. Didn't have to keep pulling the handle all the time. And taking the old new balance. I don't think we got that machine until 1924 when we were over in the new building. It seems to me we were still hand operating until about that time. That would have been 7 years. And since then, things have been changing. Until the last 3 or 4 years, I'm about ready to crawl the wall because I can't keep up with all this new systems that we have to do and all the new reports that we have to make out. Truth in lending has been something else. The new rules and regulations on that every day of the week, practically. So I've really passed the buck on that stuff. I just don't try to keep up with it. Maybe you don't want to put that.
No, that's
I don't. Maybe that shouldn't be in there.
No,
because,
but
that's the truth. I just can't see all these new rules. I don't think they should pertain to a new bank or a small bank. And that has been a lot of this in the last couple of years since our friend Bert Lance down in Georgia
help the banking industry.
He sure did.
What type of machines are they using now?
Well, we have a proof machine, which is a very good machine. You prove your work as you go along. Now, like in some banks, they have a proof machine at every window, and every teller proves his work. Well, this way, we don't do that. We have a proof machine, and it's picked up at the windows off and on during the course of the day. And the operator, which is Annie chiefly, she can detect an error right away if we've made one at the window or if we forgot to make one ticket or something. She detects it and comes back and tells that window. We have to mark each window ticket, each ticket, number 1, 2, or 3, whatever it is. and she knows which window she has to go back to have it rectified.
So you use actually more computer tape.
And we have a computer which we do all the loans and the savings account certificates and deposits. Our checking accounts are sent out. They call them.
To a larger bank that does.
Yeah,
that
it was.
takes care
So
of
we
that.
have those accounts taken care of, and we get the report back every morning. They pick it up every evening and bring it back to us the next morning. But I don't like it, because you don't have the information you need when you want to look something up. You don't have that information like we used to have it. Like if you wanted to check a person's checking account, let's say, see whether or not he was carrying on a satisfactory account or if he had enough to take care of his checks. You don't have that information in front of you. You have to go to that little machine and dial it until you can find what his balance is, and it's not convenient to me. Some of the older citizens that were active in the village of Withee, I can name you a few.
Tell us a little about what made these people special in their own rights,
Well,
memorable.
Mr. Tufts, of course, was cashier of the bank at the time I started working, later became president. Mr. Keel had a general store, as did Mr. Christensen. Dr. Nielsen was our doctor in the village of Withee and the surrounding area. Wonderful doctor. Herman Withee was our village marshal and street commissioner, and he knew every pipeline, water pipeline throughout the village. Charles Larson and Mr. Martin were both blacksmiths, had blacksmith shops. See, John Zazoba, Come Again Johnny, had a shoe store, repair shoes and harnesses and such. Jen Stixon, originally from the town of Hickson, operated the farmer's store.
How did perhaps the recreation?
Oh, I didn't mention Mr. Nielsen had a jewelry store. And his wife Alva operated the Withee Cooperative store. I think we should mention that. She
Were
was
the Nielsen's instrumental in the church in this area too?
well, the Nielsens, Dr. Nielsen's folks, as I understood it, were some of the original people who started the church, the Danish church. We always call it the Danish church. Seems to me he was a pastor. Now, you could get that information from Alfred, because he can give you that. But it just seems to me that's the way it was. But it would be kind of nice to mention Alva Nielsen, because she operated the Withee Cooperative store for many, many years.
Where was that located?
Down there on the corner where we used to have the farmer's store, where Jen Stixon and Emil Hanson. You don't even remember that. Or down here, right on the corner, the building is gone now.
He would be on
Where that, next to the drugstore, which was the old drugstore.
the old drugstore.
They had Emil Hanson and Jen Stixon had the first freezer, freezer boxes, or what do you call
Locker
it?
plant?
Locker plant, there. I suppose I've forgotten somebody I should have mentioned.
Those are some that come to mind.
Years back, this was before I started working in the bank, Mr. C.W. Funk had a meat market in Withee. That would be dated way back to when we had 7 saloons and 3 hotels.
You had to eat too.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little about the recreation? What did they do for recreation?
What did we do for recreation? We didn't have cars to run around in, that's for sure. Well, we stayed home mostly, or go around visiting our neighbors and use the horse and buggy days. Well, we didn't lack for fun. enjoyed ourselves at home and with the neighborhood children, kids, so we call them.
Were there dances, many dances?
Oh
at
yeah,
that
we
time?
used to go to, our folks never permitted us to come to town to a dance. That was too far. So we'd have neighborhood dances in the homes. And we had, if Will Buffton was going to be at the party, we could go. Our parents would let us go. He was an old friend of the family, and he was a bachelor. But he would watch us kids. Everything was on the up and up. If Will Buffton was going to go to that dance, we could go. And, well, in the summer times, you know, they used to have barn dances. And, well, if Will Buffton was going to be there, we could go. Or if our dad would go with us, we could go. We couldn't go otherwise. Then we used to have, years ago, what they call the old settlers picnic. And that was really fun. We looked forward to that every year. It was really nice.
Where was that held at?
Well, different places. It was, many years it was held in what they call the Munson Grove, where the old Munson farm was. And it was held across the river in a grove there. Just, you know, the Munson Bridge we used to call it. And there was a nice grove there. It was held at our place one time up in our woods. And over at Warren's it was held several years. Then finally it just passed from picture. After we got older, but that was something, you know. People from Owen used to come to it, in the village of Withee. Of course, it must have had cars those days, though. Beginning to have cars. Could have had to be. That was something that was also forward to. 4th of July, our whole neighborhood used to get together at our place, have 4th of July picnic.
What else did you do besides having the picnic at your house, besides eating?
You wonder what you do besides eating. Well, we were living near the river. And us kids, after we'd had our big dinner, we'd just go down to the river and wade around, not go in swimming, but we'd wade around in the water and just have fun. I suppose throw water at each other.
Speaking of food, how did your family preserve enough food so it would last all winter for your family?
Well, they usually would try to butcher around when it was colder so we could have fresh meat longer. And we'd butcher a beef or the pigs, whatever we was we had to butcher. And we'd keep that meat frozen as long as we could, and then my mother would have to can it. The sausage, of course, she'd can right away.
Did your dad smoke some meat?
Oh, yeah, wonderful. He used to have a special recipe that he smoked his bacon and ham, and that was something we loved very much. That was always would be our more or less spring and summer food, smoked meat, and then the canned meat that Mother had canned, the beef. That's the way we had to survive, on canned meat. We couldn't go to the store and buy fresh meat every time you turned around.
Where did he store the smoked meat after he smoked it?
Oh, in the summertime, after it had been smoked in the spring, we would store it in our little heater stoves that we had upstairs, and that would keep it more or less so it would be, get some air, dry it out.
You were telling me of a particular situation where your mother found a ham. Can you tell us about that?
Every year we would have our cousins come and visit us from the southern part of the state in Illinois. There was always a problem at those days. What am I going to feed them? What are we going to have for meat? You can't go to the store every day and buy fresh meat. One day Mother was upstairs cleaning, and as she was going to open the stove that was up there in the hallway, she discovered a nice ham that was in there. She'd forgotten we'd had it. So that was our meat for the company.
With the family relationships, do you think that, did children try to follow in their parents' footsteps as far as occupations, or what did they tend to do?
Well, more or less, I suppose. There wasn't the opportunity for the younger people at that time that there is today. If the boys wanted to work out, they could go out and work, but I think generally at least one of the older boys would stay home and help their dads on the farm. But and the girls, I don't know, there wasn't too much of a thing they could do was to go to school, and if you wanted to become a teacher or a nurse or take a business course, you could do it if you had the price. I'd like to tell you how I got to go to school.
Why don't you tell us?
Well, my dad said to me, Mother, what are you going to do now when you get through high school? Oh, I said, I don't know. I said, I don't want to be a teacher, but I suppose I'll have to. I'd like to be a nurse, but I don't know for sure if I could take it. Well, Dad says, what do you want to do? Oh, he said, I don't know, I'd kind of like to go and take a business course. Well, he says, I don't know, it costs quite a bit to do that for your tuition and all. But Mr. Whitmer from the Wausau Business College called on our folks, and they arranged that I could go to business college. And what was the tuition going to be? I think $250. Well, Dad says, I really don't have the money now, but I will have it in the fall when we sell the bull. So they sold the bull, and that paid for my tuition. But how was I going to eat, and where was I going to stay? Emmeline was teaching school. That was her first year teaching. No, second year teaching. Well, she says, I can maybe arrange to pay her room and board. So that was it. She paid my room and board. My folks paid my tuition. And I didn't have money to spend either, like children do nowadays. You just walk the straight and narrow. You didn't go downtown and spend $2 or $3 every evening or something. Didn't go to a movie.
And you appreciated what you got.
And I really appreciated what you had, and appreciated what your folks had sacrificed for you at that time when it was hard going. I don't think we better tell all that.
What type of responsibilities did you have at home when you were at home before you went away to school?
Oh, nothing. Just help around the house and do what I
Did you have to do chores or things like this?
I
Milk cows?
didn't. No, I didn't. I helped in the house more. Emmeline used to have to go out and help the boys if they got short-handed, but I never did. The boys, I tried to help them one time, and I couldn't milk a cow very well. So the boys said, we had to sell that cow after you milked it.
What problems do you see that were quite similar to ones that there were long ago and ones that we still have right in our own little village, our own little towns today? Do you see any similarity in some of the problems?
Well, as far as schools are concerned, there'll always be problems because people don't look alike on what we should do and what we should have in our schools. Just now, this recent election proved that people aren't looking towards the future, I think, the way they could. Is that right? We got talking about that school. Well, I don't know whether they know I voted for it or voted against it because I didn't come out and say how I felt. I said I thought it was my impression. It's off, isn't it?
What would you feel are the most important current needs of this area?
I feel that if we could have some kind of a business that would employ more people. We do have the Northern Freeport Silo that are still operating to a certain extent. And we do have the Badger Valve, which takes care of a few people, but it isn't a very large establishment, but it does hire some people. And another thing I think that would be nice for our community if we had home, an apartment building where the older people that feel that they cannot keep up their homes any longer could retire into an apartment building. I think that would be very fine.
Do you think Owen and Withee will ever get together
Yes,
as one?
I do. I think it's getting to be that way more and more, but there's always that feeling. If it wasn't for Owen, though, the people in Withee would find that they were at a loss as for employment. And a lot of our people in this area work in Owen, which is a wonderful thing. The milk plant, or whatever they call it now, what is this?
Yeah, Foremost.
Well, what's the foremost? And Teledyne, and Master Package. A lot of our local people are employed in Owen, which is a wonderful thing. So I really feel that eventually Withee and Owen should get together on a better basis than that. And I think the school had something to do with it, in getting the school, Owen Withee School. I think eventually it'll work out fine. There's a lot of controversy over that, though, at the time when they wanted to put the two schools together. In the fall of 1976, the bank, that was decided by the directors that it was necessary to increase our working space. And an addition was started in fall of 1976 and completed in August of 1977, whereby we had a space for our bookkeeping department, a drive-up window, a night depository, 2 offices, a storage vault, and other spaces. Those. Oh,
Were the Owen and Withee banks at one time slightly combined or have something in common?
no, there were 2 separate banks, but Mr. Tufts was cashier of the Owen Bank as well as the Withee Bank. He used to spend his mornings in Withee and go to Owen in the afternoons and come back to our bank around 4 o'clock. I'll never forget one day when he came back in, he says, "Say, Carl, don't you think you should put a piece of paper on the floor there for Natalie to stand on so she could reach the teller's window?" That was when I began to realize I guess I better do some teller work. Because I was so short.
Still are.
Still am.
How many employees were?
Well, at that time, there was only, as I said, Mr. Tufts would spend half a day at each bank, and it would be just the 2 of us, other than that.
And now?
Now, it's been increased to 9.
9 working.
Does that include Doris part-time? There was 1 part-time, 1 being a part-time. But I guess it's 9 with her as part-time. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, yeah.
Do you do you stay here all year round and work at the bank, or do you have something else that you do now?
I always look forward to taking a 3 months vacation in Florida. I shouldn't say that this has only been the last 10 years that I felt I could do that. I feel it. I have very efficient health. You get along without me for 3 months.
You do keep tabs on what is happening back here.
But I don't always get the information I want. But I call the bank at least once a week. Find out what's going on, or at least try to find out what's going on.
Do you mind if we ask you how old you are now?
I'm 82.
And this is
But
why
I'm very, very thankful that I have good health, and I have had good health all these many years. When I look at some other people that perhaps aren't even as old as I am, are crippled and in wheelchairs, I thank my God that I have what I have.